were holding a lot of different leadership positions throughout your career, including heading business units in the hardware industry, service industry, in large corporations with scope pretty much around the world. Today, you're the CEO of QWE Solutions, where you're helping customers for business process automation. And so today we'd like to dig a little bit into your brain and hope you can share some thoughts and some of your expectations to help CMOs, so chief marketing officers, and overall marketing leaders to support the business and the CEOs in the best possible way. And I also know that throughout your career, you always had the habit to not only talk to like senior leaders and talk to people who have a VP title, but you usually talk to people up and down the lineup. So I know you had great relationships also to like lower level engineers, developers, to marketing students, and so on. So this, I think, gives you, I'm sure, a great insight and a holistic view over the business. And that's why I'm looking forward to this conversation today.
Yeah. So, by the way, engineers are one of the greatest. So, no low-level engineers in this world. They're all wonderful people, and they're all wonderful team members. And the functions are different within the companies, as you correctly stated. We have to deal with plenty of, let's say, individual contributors, and at the same time, we're dealing with the VP level or the senior leadership, the CEO, the CFO, the COOs. So everybody has their own, I would say, expectation from the business, and I'm looking forward to covering some of that today in this podcast.
Okay, great to have you here. So, looking at your not only at your current role as a CEO of QWE Solutions, but also all of your previous roles and leadership positions you held. So, what is your expectation to a CMO, so to a Chief Marketing Officer?
We're going to dive right into the cold waters of the thing. Well, I think let's start it with the 10,000 feet view, and let's then we can go deeper diving into the areas which perhaps are interesting not only for you but also for the audience as well. So first of all, I think what's really important to understand is the role, at least in my opinion, of a CMO is changing, and a lot of this change has been brought forward by, I would say, the taking off of, for example, the AI, taking off of the new technologies that are coming up, and we are dealing a lot in the area of automation. So I think if you look from a 10,000 feet, as we call it, looking down, the step number one from a CMO perspective is the CMO changing with the times, right? Are they keeping up with the times? And I think this is the first telltale sign of people. And you remember we had plenty of discussions in the area of how do we, for example, plan marketing? Yeah, is it just OPEX? Is it 2%, 3%, 4%, 5% of the revenue? Our spend towards marketing and stuff. And this has been the traditional way of doing things, right? And the expectations from the CMO going forward are really massively changing, and it incorporates automation, it incorporates AIs, it incorporates all the new elements that are coming up. So yeah, that's basically number one. Is the top down is the marketing department adjusting to, changing to, adapting to the changing times.
That's a very important topic, and AI is a big hype at the moment, of course, but also over the years there were a lot of changes, and marketing always needs to adapt. So would you see that? Because very often we said, and in discussions we had in the past, we said, okay, marketing needs to follow the business. So how would you see the balance between marketing, of course, needs to follow and support the business, but on the other side also be a growth engine, so doing market analysis and like preparing the business for the future of the business?
Yeah. So like many other, I would say, departments, divisions, one of the key elements that I always hear about marketing is, where exactly does the role of marketing belong in a organization, right? And you touch exactly on this point with regards to, are they in the front row, right? Or is it the sales guys or pre-sales guys? Is that the front row of the thing? Is marketing invited to sit at the executive table, as an example, discussing, hand in hand with the CEO, and the other colleagues? And I think this function, if marketing is and has to change, I think marketing has to become a little bit more in the forefront. With one of our partners, we have actually started coining a new term. Instead of just calling it marketing, we're calling it smarketing. And
Okay.
smarketing
What is
basically
marketing?
going in the direction of that the new role is almost like sales and marketing, and kind of combining that functionality. It doesn't necessarily mean that doing cold calls, and it doesn't really mean necessarily every time closing the deals. But marketing itself is going in the direction that elements of what has been done by the traditional salespeople has to be taken over by the marketing. And we'll touch on that a little bit later today.
Okay, that sounds good, and that's, I mean, a whole probably yeah, it might be a topic for a completely different episode. Is like the balance between sales and marketing, or the battle between sales and marketing, or the love between sales and marketing, however you want to call it. But yeah, that's a different kind of worms, I think.
Yeah, and I
No,
got a
but
right person for you for that one as well, because slowly in this marketing, there's a lot of new experts that are coming up in this area.
yeah, that's a good point. No, looking forward to continue that discussion there. So that's good. So when marketing needs to be more in the forefront, is the saying, and also the role of a CMO is changing or evolving over time, and will continue to evolve. So how would you define marketing success? So what does good look like in marketing
Yeah,
for?
I think that's a really good question, because I think the good, what it looks like is depending on the person or depending on the audience, right? And as any good leader in marketing, you always need to be judging, engaging, in terms of what is interesting for the person, who's sitting across from you, who you're speaking to. So let's, for the purpose of this argumentation, let's discuss about what happens within the organization. All right. My experience has been is when the CMO is discussing more, let's say, with the CEO or so, the functionality that they need to discuss on is how they're going to help the company increase the revenue, right? How are they going to contribute as a growth engine for the company? And as you know, traditionally, marketing is considered as an OPEX in many of the organizations. And therefore, when you're discussing with the COO and when you're discussing with the CFO and so forth, you need to be sensitive and also make sure that you cover the topics of around how you are actually focusing on reducing the OPEX costs, right? And in the meanwhile, as you know, with the introduction of AIs or Gen AIs or RAG models and this and that and stuff, there's a lot of automation tools which are now popping up, which are now coming up. And this is something which is really expected from the marketing, that they are adapting these methodologies, these new tools, in order to bring down the overall OPEX costs, right, for the traditional spend, where you are having, let's say, multiple number of people working on the topics. Focus on how do we get those people, turned over into, let's call it, digital natives. How do we get them to be focusing on creative tasks and so forth, and take some of the repetitive elements and have the bots take care for that kind of a functionality, right? So again, to answer your question succinctly, it really depends on what does good look like, is whom you're speaking to, who's your audience. And as I just clearly explained now, really sticking to the top level, you have to take care that you bring the right messaging to the right person. Now, having said that, a lot of times, the traditional marketing, if you look at the typical KPIs, what we receive from marketing, we need to make sure that those get simplified, or actually even more focused towards the function that you're speaking to, right? So effectively, that's kind of the direction I think the CMO or the CMOs need to start thinking. Now, it may be looking or sounding a bit more complicated, but in reality, I do believe that with the introduction of automation, business process automation, AIs, and so forth, a lot of these reporting tasks can be actually taken over by robots or by digital employees. Let's call them of the future.
Mm. Well, that's a good point. And of course, like adapting to new tools and like having automated reporting. I mean, there's still a lot of marketing organizations are like putting together, compiling a lot of reports. I don't want to mention any company, but I've seen a couple of large companies who have beautiful reports, but in the background you have a number of marketing operations people basically dealing with 25 different tools and then putting everything in a PowerPoint slide deck.
And then you have the leaders of the company sitting there scratching their head, going,
Exactly.
"Well, what does that mean for me?" You know, and sometimes
Yeah.
the guys are sitting there going, and I like the numbers, I like the colors, and so forth. But when they cannot really relate to that information because it's completely on the left side or on the right side,
Yeah.
and you need to be hitting straight, right? So I think you're absolutely correct.
Yeah, you're right, and also, I mean, the funny thing is on that, it's sometimes, and then we basically already moving to the next topic is why marketing very often doesn't have a seat at the table, because this is where, I mean, when talking to CMOs and overall the marketing organization, a lot of people say, okay, well, we're the guys, we have the market insights, we look into where's the future, where's business growth and everything. Then also looking at all the analytics that 60%, 80%, whatever number you want to take, of the customer journey is done before a customer talks to our sales guys. So a lot of marketing people say, oh, but people need to listen to us. We are so important. But still the reality is that marketing and the CMO very often, there are exceptions there. Every company is different, but doesn't have a seat at the table. So the CEO talking to the CFO is talking to the CRO, and then maybe later, okay, let's talk to marketing now. So why do you think this has to do with like the not understandable reporting, or that marketing is living in an own bubble sometimes maybe?
Yeah, I think if you look into how success happens within organizations, within companies, or even failure, by the way, for that matter, it's never a single item that contributes to the success or the failure of an organization, of a department, of a CMO or his marketing teams or so. It's always accumulation of multiple elements, right? So we already talked about making sure that when you're doing things for the audience, if you're doing it for the CEO as an example, and by the way, there's exceptions. I know CEOs who effectively love to go through, every single nitty-gritty detail of the figures, right? So you really need to be able to, the messages take care of who the audience is, what is it that they're needing, and just making sure that you deliver on that, right? I think this is the step number one, and this is the basic step in order to start getting the trust, the winning feeling for what you're able to deliver and so forth. And by large means, this is exactly what's then going to help to be the first baby step towards that direction. So keeping things relevant, keeping things real, for your audience is the first basic step. Now, why doesn't it happen in all the companies? I mean, it's a rather general question because the priorities of the different companies are different, right? So some are R&D focused, some are um, focused more on in terms of how many investor growth or so. You have a lot of, for example, PEs, private equity companies who are going out and purchasing different companies. Their focus is perhaps elsewhere regarding, potentially increasing the value of the organization that they have acquired. So different people have different agendas. Different people have different requirements and goals. And this is absolutely critical for the CMO, as stated already, to be the first baby steps in that
Mm,
direction to get the seat at the table, right?
mm,
So what happens next is, let's say that you do get the seat at the table, and now the question is how, what are you doing to retain that seat at the table, right?
that's a good point.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and that's the next $1 million question. how do you stay relevant, right? Is the next AI going to come out there and just replace you for the stuff you're doing? Because suddenly, somebody comes out and everything is automated, and you were creating reports like there was no tomorrow, and suddenly the AI is generating that on demand, right? So effectively, the question then comes down to is, for the CMO is stay on top of it and just be ahead of your robot, right? Is it doable? Probably not. Probably not always, because the robots the AIs are getting clever and so forth. But the evolution of a CMO has to happen as well. I was watching one of the TV shows, and I think Sam Altman was making a comment over there. The fear that people are having about AIs and so forth, and he kind of referenced the introduction of calculators, right, when they first came out, and this is not too long ago, right? So this is the first question that people said, oh, now the kids are not going to know how to multiply 8 times 4 or 9 times 5 or a little bit more complex calculations, because they will rely on the calculators. And then in the 80s, you saw, for example, the introduction of the PCs, the taking off of the PCs and so forth, and humankind evolved. And then everybody said, now with the PCs, people are not going to have the thought process which is required to do all the calculations and stuff. And sure enough, there comes now the AIs as an example, right? So I think people are adaptable. People are able to cope with changes, right? And this is one of the guidance that I also give to the team members and the people that I speak to and so forth, that take care to change, notice what is happening for the change around you. Don't stay digital dinosaurs, but really focus on how do you continue to evolve with the times and get your guys to be digital natives, right? Many organizations kind of often have the discussion point in their mind that say, well, Rajat, I mean, we were the backbone of the organization. We put this organization to where it is today, right? Why do we need to change? And it's a tough one, right? It's a difficult one, because people have been there, they have contributed to the success of the organization, and suddenly they realize that they're no longer in control. So here again, again, for the organizations, for the CMO, it's really relevant that not only is he getting the seat at the table, but that his whole organization is coming along for the ride, and to make sure that all the people within his team, understand what the changes are, what the changes mean, and then focus on getting everybody, into the same rhythm.
Yeah. And that also then surely helps perhaps avoiding this, like, being in a defensive mode, because I see a lot of marketing people are more in a defense mode and saying, I need to justify, okay, why are we spending this? Why do we have the resources? Why are we doing things like this or that? And yeah, you mentioned before that marketing needs to be at the forefront and needs to be a growth driver, and then it's relevant. And this is absolutely what the role of marketing should be, and has always been. And there are a lot of great examples. There are a lot of fantastic CMOs and marketing teams around the world in so many different companies. So there are a lot of things being done right.
Christian, you touched on a really key point also. The defensive mode, it's just being on the back foot, right? And being in a defensive mode, being in the back foot, you are not able to do the things that you really want to do, or as you call it, keeping your seat at the table, or whether it's enabling your company to go forward, right? So this is really critical and crucial for the CMO to keep in the back of the mind, that this is something that they have to take care for.
Yeah. And when you think about marketing, like driving it and like being relevant for the different audience, and this actually a very, very good point, but I'll touch on that again later. Like looking back at your career, and you have accomplished a lot of massive growth. I mean, I remember you have once had the target of like doubling notebook sales in a hardware business in a commodity market, which was nearly impossible. And of course, you overachieved it. Now, looking at all the different roles you had in the past, do you remember anything where marketing really excited you, where you said, okay, well, marketing is not part of my OPEX, but hey, marketing is fantastic, and this is what I want to see more of?
Yeah, I mean, we have had great people. I mean, you know that you and I have worked tremendously together in order to get the messages out, right? And this ability to be able to get all the messages out constantly, I think this is absolutely critical. You know, communication, whether it's with your customers, communication, whether it's with your team members, communication, whether it's with your stakeholders, with your leadership and so forth. It's really important and crucial regarding that the messaging, what you're trying to achieve and do, is there for all the people, is consistent for all the people. And I cannot emphasize enough, how important the word consistency is,
Yeah,
because it's okay to be, having the let's call it far-fetched ideas and thoughts and so forth. But if you cannot communicate that in a consistent manner to everybody, I think things then start to fail, right? So then you have to think about from a marketing perspective, it's partly its internal role, how do you bring the internal messaging to the people, to the team members, aligning it with product management if you're doing a product as an example to make sure that the message goes out. But at the same time, how do you bring this messaging also out to the customers so that it gathers confidence for them? It gathers, trust from them to what you're attempting to do. So
yeah,
marketing is absolutely crucial to ensure that you're building trust, you're building confidence, you're building, the right messaging in terms of what the customers are looking for, and that bringing what the customers are looking for back into the let's say factory or back into the leadership of the company, say, hey, this is the customer's voice, this is kind of what goes on. And then actually now starting to use the AIs and so forth to back up that request with facts, right? Whether it's potential numbers, outlooks, whatever might be the case. So there's a saying I read somewhere. I do not know if it was on LinkedIn or something somewhere else. The saying was around the salespeople. It's not the AI that's going to replace the salesperson, but it's the salesperson using the AI that's going to be replacing the salesperson. And I think the same is applicable also for the marketing. It's not the AI that's going to be replacing the marketing person, but it's the marketing person using the AI and using the latest business automation technologies that's going to be replacing the traditional marketing person, right? Consistency of messaging, bringing it across to the different people. And that's really what it boils down to. And then effectively, it's putting the different building blocks together, right? Again, as I said, success is not dependent on one element. Breakthroughs don't happen with one topic, right? Breakthroughs happen with consistency, with making sure all your building blocks are in place and they are there for long term.
yeah. Well, that's a good point, definitely. And I like that you said you need to establish trust, and this is something, of course, the entire company and the CEO is very important for that as well. But marketing needs to communicate and build that trust, because yeah, customers typically, in no matter if it's B2B or B2C, they don't buy like because the product has the fanciest, I don't know, is the most reliable or has the fanciest specs, but because a person is trusting the company, is trusting the people. So yeah, and marketing is
Absolutely.
definitely playing a role there.
And Germany, we do a fantastic job in terms of marketing, for example, made in Germany. If you look into the automotive sector as an example,
Yeah.
any car brand that you're taking, which is coming out there, and I just use automotive as one example. You can really see that the branding, the marketing that has been done regarding made in Germany, or at least designed in Germany, or produced in Germany, however the stuff might be, or engineered in Germany even, right? Those are the really successful marketing campaigns that have done. And then of course you back it up with a fantastic product,
Yeah.
and you have a killer combination, right?
You always need to prove that as well. Yeah, that's good. Now we talked about, and you mentioned a couple of times, which I think is a very good point around audience, and marketing needs to look at, okay, do I talk to the CEO, do I talk to the salespeople, do I talk to the CFO, and so on, and that is really important. So, and that is also, well, let's phrase it in a different way. What I've seen very often is that people in boards, CEOs, sales leaders, they say, okay, well, I know marketing is doing something. I guess it's good, but I don't really understand it. So why don't I get a proper briefing? I don't understand the reporting and everything. So could you maybe, if we have some CMOs watching here, give some advice? How would you like to have, or how should a reporting and a briefing look like? So a briefing before a campaign, let's say you together with a CMO agreed on a campaign, on the objectives and everything. How should a briefing for the rest of the board members look like? And then when the campaign is starting or when it's ending, what kind of reports would you expect?
Yeah, I think quite a lot of times, often when we are, I would lovingly use the word you used a few minutes ago called, "Are they living in a bubble?" Quite a lot of times when people, and it's human nature, right? When we are in our own bubble, we tend to regurgitate our own facts, right? So we try to continue to relive our own facts, and of course, we have done perhaps that story in our own minds 1,000 times or 100 times. But then we often forget that when we are trying to communicate it, bring it to the audience, whoever the audience might be, that this audience might be hearing it or seeing it for the first time, right?
Yeah,
So, in order to kind of make that happen, you need to have a succinct. I would say, I like, for example, the number five, right? So I like to just say, keep it simple, keep it to the top five key elements, and so forth. That doesn't mean, the saying is called "the devil is in the details," right? That doesn't mean that you just completely forego the details, right? You need to have that. You need to have that in the backup, perhaps. You need to have that in the background or so, and make sure that that's available. But keep things simple. Keep it to the top point. Say, okay, this is the plan. Let's say these are the top five key elements in this plan, and then we're going to be executing it. Here's a timeline that's going to be done for the execution of this plan, and this is the desired outcomes that you will have, after you're there, and be ready to pivot, right? Because when you're on the ground, you're running the campaign or you're doing anything. Often things can change on the ground, right? Things can happen that you didn't predict or you didn't think about. So be ready to pivot if that happens, right? Change is inevitable. So just making sure that happens, but keeping things simple, keep it the top five elements. What is it that you're doing? What is the desired outcome? What is it that and last but not least, how does that align with the goals of the CEO, right?
that's
Or
really
how
important.
does it align with the CEO agenda, right? So
Yeah,
once you have that, right, you have built the relevance to what the CEO is looking for. You have built the ideas around what the plans are, and you're able to completely bring it forward in a succinct manner, in an easy to understand manner, so that everybody's there. And then, of course, you have your details, right? And details usually can be presented upon request, or it's there for the people who are planning to implement or execute on that plan, right?
yeah.
So that's how I like it, right? There are other CEOs who might prefer it differently. There are other people who might appreciate other ways of going forward, but I like to make sure it's simple, straightforward. Do a 5 point plan and then present that out. Be ready to make the changes. Be ready to answer what ifs, the scenarios and so forth. And the homework is done in the background. And I think that's the way to do it, at least in my books.
Makes absolutely sense. Would you be able to like phrase what are like the top three metrics? Or you said you like top five. So what would be the top five metrics marketing should report to the board or to the CEO? Or would you say this depends a lot from the business, from the company, and from the campaign?
Yeah, it depends on the campaign. So, I mean, like I said, CEOs always like revenue numbers, right? So, and just to kind of make sure that is aligned to the company targets, or that is aligned to the company desire or his vision or so, right?
Mm.
So I think this is quite important. If you also have the CFO sitting in the audience, you cannot overcome that. What would be the cost of such a campaign? And you
Yeah.
cannot be completely out on the left field to say, okay, we are going to blow up the budgets by this and this much, and then of course the return on investment will be, I don't know, a little, right?
Mm.
So these guys are looking for, how do I get the biggest bang for my buck? Right. So when I'm going to be investing, spending, whatever the amounts of money might be, or wherever the funding might be coming from, they're more interested to say, how's that going to impact my top line and my bottom line? Right. Are
Mm.
we in line with what the expectations are? So I think if we keep it to that, that effectively you will catch most of the CEOs, CFOs, COs, CROs. You'll be able to catch most of them. Of course, if you start to deviate massively from that, then yeah, maybe that's what's expected. I don't know. you
Yeah.
know,
And
that's
how
the
would
reason I
you
said
how
depends.
what is your experience in terms of honesty? I mean, of course, we always need to be honest, and we are always honest in business. But sometimes, and we talked about the sometimes not easy to understand or sometimes fluffy marketing reports where all the marketing terms are used that a CFO, CRO, CEO doesn't understand. How would you deal with things like also putting the truth on the table and saying, okay, we had a fantastic idea, we all bought into that, but okay, it didn't work. This part didn't work at all. This part worked, and this is the honest truth. Or you mentioned spending and OPEX, and in some marketing reports I've seen in my life is there's the like external spending for, I don't know, asset creation, media spending, and so on. And if you calculate the ROI, it's positive, but then if you consider that, I don't know, you have 265 people who are working on that campaign for 6 months. If you put this in the equation, then all of a sudden it looks different. So how would you recommend should a CMO deal with also, yeah,
I
with
think
with the honest.
you have a lot of questions on this one. Honesty is, I think, is a very basic fundamental element that we need
Yeah,
to start
I
with, right?
agree.
We have to be honest to ourselves, and we have to be honest to the company and the CEOs and the other various stakeholders, CFOs, CROs, and so forth, right?
Yeah.
And we have to say it the way it is, right? And this one of the things that I like, especially also about the German culture, that you say things the way they are, right? So there's not really too much left for ambiguity about that this can be and this cannot be. The second, you asked a lot of smaller questions in there, and we'll come to that over the next few minutes. But let me jump to the last part of the question, which goes in the direction of, let's say, make or buy decisions, right? Because if you are a CMO, as an example, and let's say you have X number of people, or 200 people, or 100 people, or whatever it is, working on a campaign, and suddenly you realize that a lot of that stuff can be automated, um, you know, it's up to you to make sure that that gets automated, right?
Mm.
Even though it might be painful in the beginning, that you say, okay, I have bench, right? Bench means I have effectively not really people being, and here's in the financial terms, they will sometimes use it as a I cost, so indirect cost of sales. But bench basically becomes an OPEX, right?
Mm.
So it's an absolute something that the CMO then has to and is obliged to make sure that he's working on reducing the costs or so, and not only focus on, okay, my power is, for example, to see how big my department is, because
Yeah.
sooner or later that will catch up to them, right? And then it will be even a much more tougher decisions that will then need to be made, at that time. So you have new technologies coming in, and I face this almost, I would say, almost on a daily basis, because the guys are sitting there, whether it's in the development area, or whether it's in services area, or whether it's in anything else. The fact is, automation is coming, driven by AI, right? Driven by business processes that are getting automated, right? It
Mm.
means in those particular tasks, you will need fewer people going forward. I'll give you an example. So with one of our partners, we are working on on technologies where you are able to have a product which speaks for itself. Okay, so what does that mean? So it's a complex product, let's say a tractor or something like that,
Mm.
and the customer during the sales process time is interested to understand the nitty gritties, right? What does this button do? How do I attach, I don't know, a front loader onto this tractor? How do I make this and this happen or so? What are the services I can do myself, and what are the services I need to bring it to the dealership, right? So these are all the questions that are there, right? So the technology is now already moving in the direction where this is all automated, so
Mm.
that the customer can actually easily click towards any of the elements, and the product basically answers that for them. Okay. Having said that, this also has an advantage for a salespeople, because now if you don't have a very experienced salesperson who's been in the company for 20, 30 years, as an example, who knows all the ins and outs of those things,
Mm.
suddenly you can also have a younger salesperson who may not be so experienced, but now together with the coupled with the technology, he's able to offer similar information to the customer which the customer is desiring.
Yeah.
On the back end, let's say the customer does purchase a product and wants to be now trained on it, right? This also can be used technology wise into this area as well. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the marketing guy comes back and says, well, I've got people designing brochures, and I've got people designing this, and I've got, back end help marketing people who are answering this and this and this questions or so, right? So we cannot adopt this technology, right? So exactly, you see how ridiculous that sounds, right? So it goes exactly in this direction. You use the word honesty, so you have to be honest as a CEO, excuse me, as a CMO. You have to be honest to the fact that you need to repurpose the people into other areas, into other creative things, maybe having new elements or new tasks that are coming up that they should be doing. People who are subject matter experts, who understand the processes, who understand how things are, they will always be needed, right? Because simply they understand the process. The AI is not there yet. It's not fully there yet. So you still need you still need to a certain degree the number of people in order to be able to manage it. But a lot of the tasks will change, right? And if you're not honest as a CMO and you don't say, okay, I don't want to adopt technology, I don't want to do this, but I have, to make sure my people keep busy for the sake of
Mm.
staying busy. I think that's the wrong approach, right?
No, absolutely, absolutely. Good point you're touching there. And that reminds me, I'm just thinking about, which is maybe the opposite of automation, maybe, or maybe not. But it's more the psychology in terms of audience targeting. What I mean by that is, you've probably also seen that sometimes, like marketing or somebody in the company says, okay, now we have a target audience, especially in the B2B segment. We have target audience, we have target customers, we have specific people there. Then we do somebody in sales and marketing, wherever, is doing a pipeline gap analysis and saying, okay, those are the customers we should address with this specific message or specific campaign. How would you see who is deciding which customers to address? Because you might have seen also similar things. Like, I mean, I've seen campaigns in the past where marketing said, okay, based on whatever algorithm or categorization, those are our potential customers. We have huge revenue potential here. And then sales all of a sudden is deleting, I don't know, 20% of the email addresses in Salesforce or in another CRM because it's, I don't want marketing to address my customers. And then afterwards, you have the battle between marketing and sales and the different organizations. So how would you see that? Because this can be, of course, with tools, with automation, this could be theoretically automated. But on the other side, I fully understand, of course, salespeople who are saying, well, I have a relationship with this customer and I'm working on a certain project and I don't want marketing or anyone else to interfere. So how would you balance that? Because there's a theoretical answer and saying, okay, let the algorithm and AI decide on that. But then there's a human side of things, which is also relevant, I think.
Yeah, so I think there's I would say a little bit of a funny answer, and then we take the serious answer. The funny answer is, who do you think is actually designing the algorithms, right? At least at the current stage, there's some started to where the AIs are designing the algorithms, that based on their lessons learned or based on what they have been fed through the data pipelines and stuff like that, right? So the algorithms are, to a great degree, still designed by people, right? So we make
Yep.
mistakes, we learn from mistakes,
Good
we
point.
implement the technological elements. So having said that, let's come down to, somebody, let's say, saying, well, I don't think this is a relevant customer, right? Or this is not a area which we should focus on, but I rather just kind of stay with my traditional focused customers, right? I think the demographics of the audience for um, for bringing a product to the market, right, is changing. Okay, and here's what I mean by that. Let's assume that my head is some kind of is a product, right? Sometimes you are able to put a camera which is on this side, looking at the product, and sometimes you're putting it on this side, looking at the product. It's still the same product, right? It's just whether you put the view from here, from here, from here, from here, and everybody is biased, as we as human beings are biased, right? So if you're sitting on this side as a salesperson and the marketing is shining the light on this side and say, hey, look, what a great product, the sales guy will say not relevant to my audience, and therefore deletes out the lead as an example, right? And this will happen. And I can tell you why this will happen. You and I were discussing on one of the NDA projects that we are currently looking at, where I asked for your guidance on it. We are already working from a technology from a technology view. We are already working on ways to identify, um, let's call it the new leads, new opportunities from existing customers, right? So we touched on that a little bit in terms of how we can kind of going forward do that. And here, you won't have the traditional marketing warm body who will be working on that, but you will actually have an AI supporting the marketing department and their efforts in order to be able to identify and generate these new leads, right? Which will be then, of course, fed into the CRM system, right? And now the question is, well, who picks it up, right? Is it the sales guy who picks it up, or is it the marketing guy? I can already generate algorithms, for example, to say, okay, how many leads were dropped? How many leads were, and automatically bring that to a higher level if you see too many leads are being dropped, right?
Right.
um, or you can also be looking at, for example, to say, okay, if this lead is coming, how do you want it to be treated? All of this stuff can already be automated, right? So
Yeah.
it's the technology is there, right? And to picking it up. So I think going forward, it doesn't really matter who you are within the organization. I think the organization has to have a common view, common focus, which says, working on reducing of the costs and working on increasing of the revenue. Okay. There is another discussion which I was having with a colleague, and now this is a bit of digression from what you and I are discussing about. Was the service people going out and actively being paid to make additional sales, when they're out in the field, right? And the impact of that on customer trust, who actually expect these guys to be coming in and saying, hey, this is how you best fix your product or so, and not going out there and selling something in addition. In the same way, if you're expecting that your salesperson is calling upon you to make a sale, and suddenly the marketing guy is jumping in and says, hey, we got this and this and this, would you also like to buy, right?
Yeah.
So in my world, I think certain traditional roles have to be maintained, but at the same time, I think the whole organization needs to be focused in terms of delivering a common view and a common goal in terms of what is to be achieved. That means marketing has to be sales focused as well. Hence,
Yeah.
again, going back to the wording that I used at the beginning of the podcast, named smarketing as an example.
Yeah.
Right. I like that term because I think that's a very, very
That's
clever
good.
play on words, but at the same time, it also drives home a good message,
Yeah.
about, yeah, about what's to come or what's
It
already here, but it's needs to be honed upon.
it definitely is, and this is always one of the first things. And people who were like over the years, when I was leading marketing organizations, one of the first things they learned is like knowing the business target, because there are so many people who have
Yeah,
said, okay, what is the target? And there are a lot of marketing people who say, okay, this is my budget. Those are the marketing KPIs, click through rate, cost per million, whatever stuff it is. But when I ask, okay, what is the revenue? What is the sellout? What are you trying to achieve in which countries? It's
yeah.
like, well, I'm marketing.
Yeah,
But I
I
think this
absolutely
is,
loved your example earlier when you told me, earlier when you said, okay, Rajat, you remember we were looking at that chart which is
yeah,
going up and up and up. Perhaps for the audience, you want to reiterate that, that
yeah,
marketing was focused on, what the
exactly.
outbound sales is.
Exactly. So we had in the chat we had before, yeah. So I remember it was years ago. I had when we had it was certain sellout targets in terms of revenue and units in a number of countries, and on our desks where I was sitting together with most of my team, every Monday we printed out the chart on sell in and sell out and revenue and the development. And there were some other marketing people sometimes asking me, okay, why are you doing that? I mean, where are the marketing metrics? And I said, well, this is the number one target we were giving, and whatever we do feeds into that. And that is important. And a lot of marketing people are surprised. But when you talk about that, and this not, it shouldn't be like a bashing on those marketing people, but it's
Yeah.
more, I think all of us and our responsibility to like educate and raise that understanding of marketing people that yes, first and foremost, the business is paying all of the salaries across the
Yeah.
company, and we all should like focus on this one and have our role to contribute.
And Christian, this is exactly, goes back now to answer the first question you asked. How do you make sure you get a seat at the table, right? If you
Yeah,
as a CMO now can articulate that in a very good way to the CEO, you will have a seat at the table, right?
yeah,
If you can go out there and articulate, for example, we participate in, I do not know, 20 different events or something like that. The CEO will sit there and scratch his head and say, okay, what does that
exactly,
mean, right? And the
exactly.
CFO is going to be scratching this side of the head and going, wait a second, does that mean my OPEX goes up and up and up or something like that, right?
Yeah,
So exactly as now this brings a whole story in a good roundabout way. This is exactly the way forward, right? Having a
yeah,
common idea and having the common goal. And by the way, this is not only the role of the CMO to say, hey, CEO, where do we stand with our goals and targets?
yeah,
But this is really also up to the CEO to make sure that he or she articulates this in a good way as well to the rest of the team to say, look, guys, this is what we're going for, right? So then everybody follows the cadence, everybody follows, their own elements, what they're going to do in order to contribute towards that. So I think very well put and very well said.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, then just before we close, one last topic I quickly want to touch on as talking about global setup and global business. I mean, you were heading various business units and companies in global roles, in Europe roles, in Europe, Middle East, Africa roles, and so on. So you are very familiar with like the different cultures, different markets, and everything. Also in Asia and basically all around the world. So what advice would you give for companies and especially CMOs trying to internationalize? Because there are a lot of companies, like, for example, an Asian company wants to expand to Europe, or a North American company wants to expand to Asia.
Yeah.
And there are some challenges with this one. So how would you tackle like this going global, going
Yeah.
international?
I think this is relatively straightforward, and nothing much has changed here in my view since last several years. And maybe you can consider this as a cliche, which is think global, act local, right? So I think that is still valid for today, right? Um, Having said that, there are certain elements that are changing. Again, coming back to the topic of introduction of AI, introduction of automation, you might have had outsourced a lot of or farmed out a lot of your, let's call it, I don't know. I'm just using now a silly example like PowerPoint presentation. We say, okay, we have a team sitting in India, or we have a team sitting somewhere in Asia who is working on creating PowerPoint presentations, right? In the
Right.
meanwhile, you can already have the AI create the first set of PowerPoint presentation for you. and then you can, in quintessence, just kind of put it together and get the, nail the right messaging down, right? So in this scenario is what I'm coming back to now and saying is use AI in addition to, think global, act local, and then do a last validation with the local teams, because those are the feet on the street in the local areas trying to bring the local products into the market. So don't choose certain words which might be offensive to one or the other, in one or the other languages or so, and it may be as simple as that, but the businesses to bring products forward, to bring branding forward, to bring, all these elements together, it's a very complex process, and I hope that we can touch on that perhaps in another podcast or something like that, right? But to summarize it, again, going back, think global, act local, and utilize AI and business automation tools to support the bringing the things forward.
Absolutely, I like that. And one important point you mentioned is like then validate it with the local teams. And I would even maybe go one step further and say not only validate it, but also involve the people at an early stage. Because always when you're coming from a headquarter and saying, okay, I used all the analytics and everything is right, and here take it and go and use it with your customers. There's like the not invented here syndrome. Human nature is then saying, oh, well, no, now I explain the next, I don't know, 3 months, I go to headquarters, explain them why it doesn't work in my country. But if you involve them in an early stage, give them the feeling they are part of the global team, then you get a support. And this is still thing I think we cannot automate. So a bit of human psychology is still in the mix, isn't it?
Yeah, AI is able to do a lot, but you're absolutely right. It's not, to be able to deal with the details in this way. The technology is not there yet. Maybe it gets there in the next 3, 4, 5 years or something like that. But you're absolutely right. We're not there yet, and therefore you need to have the local teams in order to do it. And as we discussed earlier, what's good for one country, which is where the, let's say, headquarters are or so, you cannot always just translate that out into the local markets. Often it doesn't work, whether it's regarding certain product features, whether it's regarding, and we see this, by the way. Very wonderful example is the adaptation of the EVs, right? So electric vehicles. If you look into how the EVs are being accepted in different countries, and at what level or so, how they're being accepted, marketing plays a big role in that, and then to follow it up and make sure that the infrastructure gets there and so forth. But and we're living through a really interesting, wonderful age at the moment where we can see these changes happening. And I think the role of marketing will become stronger, or it has to become stronger, in order to make sure, to help the world, to help the people, to help the customers, to help, the average citizens go through this change, right? To be able to walk through this change. And this is the reason why I believe that in the current day and age where we are today with AIs and so forth, it's really crucial that marketing, picks up the ball and make sure that they help to carry themselves, the customers, the people, the citizens, in whichever capacity that they're doing, to help them across together and not leaving people behind.
Yeah, I like the term you used, like walk. The marketing helps to walk the change, because very often, and especially on new technologies like AI, there sometimes it's driven, or the buzz around the world is driven by, I would say, people who love the hype, people who are, I don't know, techies, people who are on the forefront. But a lot of people are just like, oh, wait a second, what is that? But so I like what you said, like walk the change, and where not only marketing, we all can help. That's really crucial. Yeah. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we close, the very last question, because we want to help like CMOs and marketing leaders to like get some insights, and really want to help them in their daily life and in how they set up the marketing organization. Let's think about a scenario. One of your best friends is appointed as CMO of a medium or larger company for the first time. What advice would you give him?
I mean, where to start, or is he new in the new job or so?
He's coming from a different. He's the first time he's leading an overall marketing organization, and he's coming to you and saying, "Rajat, oh, I just accepted this. It sounds great, but what should I do next?" So, what advice would you give him?
I would say take the first advice that I give to anybody who's taking over a big role or big job is take one day at a time, right? So, remember if you are driving, your vehicle at a speed where it is still manageable, you know, I think that's absolutely, absolutely critical that you can make then the changes that you need to make, right? If you're driving already very super fast from the day number one, you will oversteer or understeer, and you will lose control, right? So you got to take one day at a time. This is point number one. Point number two is make sure that you understand the objectives that you're going for, that you're being asked to achieve, right? But point number three, make sure that you bring your team along for the ride, right? It's always a team effort, and it's not something that you say, okay, I think the German word is Einzelgänger or something like that, right? So I'm a standalone champion or so. I think that will definitely not work. So I think if I was to, instead of the five, if I was to choose three elements, those would be it, right? Make sure you drive at the speed, which is something where you don't lose anybody. Make sure you also don't lose yourself. And in terms of understanding the business, easiest way to do is understand the targets. What is it that you're going for? And third element is it's always a team effort, whether it's local teams, international teams. Those are then the details that you have to go through, of course. But at a high level, it is a team effort, and one must not lose sight of that. Right?
Yeah.
And that would be my top three choices to go start with.
That's important. So it sounds like if like your friend who is appointed as CMO will be a good CMO. He'll be a happy camper.
Well, well, I think a happy camper in the beginning it's always you have your sleepless nights. I've taken over jobs as well, which were completely different to what I was originally trained to be or so. And of course, you have your butterflies, and of course, you have your thinking about have I bitten off a bit too much that I can chew, right?
Yeah.
But I think if you follow these three elements, generally people want to help. Teams want to help. If you look into how the world is changing, we are going into an era where people generally want to help, right? So keep that in mind, and bring the teams along, and don't be afraid to make the change, right? So if something is not working out, somebody is not working out, or so, don't be afraid to make the change. So you have to be able to do it, but do it at a pace where you don't lose the people
Okay, that's good. Sounds
and
great.
keep sight of the objective, right?
Of course. Okay, great. Rajat, was a pleasure talking to you as always. So thanks a lot for
Thanks,
your time.
Christian.
Much appreciated. And thank you, and wish you a wonderful rest of the day. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, sir.